about 600,000 years ago, another human species walked the earth. They hunted. They made tools. They survived ice ages. And for thousands of years, they lived beside us. Then, around 40,000 years ago, they vanished. Completely. Or at least, that's what we thought. Because even today, every non-African human carries fragments of their DNA inside their body. A ghost species, still living within us. They were called Homo neanderthalensis, the Neanderthals. For decades, they were portrayed as primitive cavemen, unintelligent, brutish, inferior to modern humans. But modern research is painting a very different picture. They buried their dead. They created symbolic objects. They may have made art. And some of the genes that help shape our immune system today came from them. So who were the Neanderthals really? And what if the story we've been told about them was completely wrong? It starts with one man, one skeleton, one mistake that lasted a century. In 1856, limestone quarry workers in Germany's Neander Valley pulled a set of bones from the rock. Unmistakably human, but not quite. The brow ridge heavy, the skull low and thick, the limb bones built for something far more powerful than anything alive today. Scientists named the species. The public went to work imagining it. In 1911, a French researcher named Marcelin Boule published a reconstruction based on a skeleton found at La Chapelle aux Saints. He concluded it walked stooped, knees bent, head thrust forward, cognitively limited, barely above an intelligent ape. That image spread through textbooks and museum displays for over 50 years. The hunched caveman, the grunting brute, the dead end of human evolution. There was just one problem. The La Chapelle skeleton was an elderly male. Severe osteoarthritis throughout the spine and joints. The stooped posture wasn't typical of the species. It was the posture of an old man in chronic pain who had likely been in agony for years. Boule built a century of assumptions on the wrong skeleton. One arthritic individual, unrepresentative, misread. And the image set so fast and spread so far that it took generations of researchers to begin undoing it. The real Neanderthal looks nothing like that. The myth that died hardest was the brain. For decades, the explanation for Neanderthal extinction was clean and simple. They were less intelligent, smaller-brained. We outthought them. The world moved on. The numbers say otherwise. Average Neanderthal brain volume, 1,410 cubic centimeters. Average modern human brain volume, 1,350 cubic centimeters. Neanderthals had larger brains than we do. Not slightly, not marginally, measurably, consistently, on average, larger. The shape differed. Their brains were more elongated. Ours are rounder, with a larger parietal region associated with abstract thinking and information integration. Whether that difference in shape translated into meaningful cognitive differences remains genuinely debated. But the foundational claim that Neanderthals were cognitively limited by brain size is not supported by the data. It never was. What they actually did with those brains makes the picture stranger still. At Cueva de los Aviones in Spain, archaeologists recovered perforated shells, pigment-stained objects, personal ornaments, not tools, not weapons, nothing functional, jewelry, dated using uranium-thorium analysis to approximately 115,000 years ago, confirmed by a study published in Science Advances in 2018. Homo sapiens did not reach Europe until roughly 45,000 years ago. Neanderthals were making jewelry 70,000 years before we set foot on this continent. not imitating us, not following our lead. They got there first. Symbolic thought, the ability to assign meaning to an object beyond its physical function, was long considered the cognitive threshold that separated modern humans from everything that came before. A defining line, a wall between us and them. The evidence from Cueva de los Aviones places Neanderthals on our side of that wall by 70 millennia. La Pasiega is a cave in northern Spain. On one of its walls, there is a ladder-shaped arrangement of red lines. Not an animal, not a human figure. Abstract mark-making, intentional, symbolic. In 2018, a team led by Dirk Hoffman published uranium-thorium dating of the calcite crust overlying the pigment. The minimum age of the art beneath, 65,000 years. Published in the journal Science. Homo sapiens was not in Europe 65,000 years ago. The art in La Pasiega is Neanderthal. Then there are the burials. At Shanidar Cave in Iraqi Kurdistan, multiple Neanderthal individuals were found placed deliberately in the earth, not scattered by predators, not displaced by water, buried. One individual, Shanidar 4, was found with pollen deposits from multiple flowering plant species in the surrounding sediment. Whether those flowers were placed as grave goods remains debated among researchers. What is not debated is the burial itself. Deliberate burial of the dead implies something about how a species understands mortality, about what death means. Whether Neanderthals held any belief in what came after it, we cannot say. But this is not the behavior of an animal. It is the behavior of a being that understood death well enough to mark it, to respond to it, to do something in the face of it. And then, from a cave in Slovenia, an object that has divided researchers for 30 years, the Divje Babe flute, a cave bear femur, 4 holes, dated to approximately 60,000 years ago. Whether it is a deliberate musical instrument or a bone gnawed by a carnivore, researchers still disagree. But the spacing of those holes is difficult to explain by random tooth marks alone. And if it is what some researchers believe it to be, a flute, intentionally constructed, it is the oldest musical instrument ever found. Made in a cave in Europe, by a Neanderthal, 60,000 years before anyone wrote anything down. They painted walls. They buried their dead. And perhaps, in the dark of a Slovenian cave, they made music. In 2017, researchers examined the dental calculus of Neanderthal teeth from El Cedron Cave in northern Spain. Dental calculus is hardened plaque. It forms over years and traps what a person eats, food particles, bacteria, plant fragments, then calcifies around them. A sealed chemical archive, intact across tens of thousands of years, a direct record of a life. What they found in one individual's calculus, yarrow and groundsel, 2 plants with no significant nutritional value. Both are bitter. Both are well documented in the centuries since as medicinal herbs, one with anti-inflammatory properties, one with anti-parasitic effects. The individual in question had a dental abscess, evidence of intestinal parasites. They were sick, and they appear to have been consuming, deliberately, nutritionally worthless bitter plants that happened to address the exact conditions they were suffering from. That is not foraging. That is not accident. That is pharmacology. Practiced 30,000 years before the first written medical text exists anywhere on Earth. But the most important evidence from El Cedron isn't the medicine. It's what the medicine implies about the people around the patient. The genetic profiles from El Cedron suggest the individuals recovered. They were a family group. related individuals, living together, dying together. Not a herd, a family. Someone in that family knew which plants to gather. Someone prepared them. Someone gave them to the sick. And at Shanidar Cave, there is an individual who makes all of this impossible to dismiss. Shanidar I, a male, middle-aged at death, which, given what his skeleton shows, represents extraordinary survival. He had a withered right arm, likely congenitally absent below the elbow or amputated early in life. Partial blindness in the left eye, significant hearing loss, evidence of a healed, crushing blow to the skull, degenerative joint disease throughout. He could not hunt. He could not gather effectively. In a Neanderthal band crossing glacial Europe, where every calorie was work and every winter was a threat, he had almost nothing to contribute to the group's survival. He survived anyway. For years, possibly decades after his injuries. Someone fed him. Someone kept him warm. In the harshest environment our species has ever occupied, a group of Neanderthals made a choice, not a strategic one, not an efficient one, to keep alive someone who could not keep himself alive. That is not the behavior of a brute. That is compassion, deliberate, costly, chosen. In 2010, everything changed. Svante Pääbo and his team at the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology published the first draft sequence of the Neanderthal genome, ancient DNA, extracted from 50,000-year-old bone, a technical achievement that had seemed impossible a decade earlier. The result was unambiguous. Non-African modern humans carry between 1% and 4% Neanderthal DNA. The two species met. They interacted. They had children. The clean replacement model, Homo sapiens spreading out of Africa and erasing every other human lineage they encountered, was not what happened. Pääbo received the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine in 2022. The first Nobel Prize ever awarded specifically for research into human evolutionary history. But the percentage isn't the most important finding. The function is. Certain Neanderthal gene variants didn't merely survive the interbreeding. They spread rapidly, selectively, through modern human populations afterward. Which means they were useful. They were advantages. They were chosen by survival itself. Variants in the innate immune system, in the body's first-line response to unknown pathogens, adaptations that Neanderthals had been developing for hundreds of thousands of years in European and Asian environments that were entirely new to humans who had just arrived from Africa. New diseases, new parasites, new winters. We didn't just encounter Neanderthals, we borrowed their defenses. The immune adaptations that got your ancestors through their first European winter. The biological toolkit that helped early modern humans survive a continent they had never seen. The disease resistances that let a small group of migrants from Africa eventually populate the entire northern hemisphere. Some of that toolkit was built by Neanderthals over hundreds of thousands of years in the cold, and they gave it to us. They survived in Europe for over 300,000 years, through ice ages that buried the continent under kilometers of ice, through volcanic winters that darkened the sky for years, through predators and famines and every climatic catastrophe the Pleistocene produced. They crossed mountain ranges. They adapted to coastal environments. They spread from Western Europe to Central Asia. They made jewelry before we existed on this continent. They painted caves. They buried their dead. They cared for their injured and their sick. They practiced medicine. They may have made music in the dark. And then, around 40,000 years ago, they were gone. We don't know exactly why. The climate was shifting. Homo sapiens were spreading. Competition for resources was intensifying. The last Neanderthal groups shrank, fragmented, retreated to the margins. And at some point, in some valley, in some cave, in some winter we will never know, the last of them died. But only just, because before they disappeared, they had children with us. And those children had children. And somewhere in that chain of generations, the Neanderthal line didn't end. It continued, inside us. Right now, if you are reading this outside of sub-Saharan Africa, you are carrying the evidence, scattered across your genome in fragments, doing things you will never notice. The depth of your sleep tonight, your immune system's first response to an unknown virus, your exact threshold for pain. These are not entirely modern adaptations. Some of them are ancient, built over hundreds of thousands of years by people who learned this planet's dangers long before we arrived. We called them primitive for a century. We put them in museum dioramas, stooped and vacant-eyed, as a before picture. A dead end. Something we surpassed. They had larger brains than we do. They made symbolic art 70,000 years before we reached their continent. They buried their dead. They healed their sick. They kept their disabled alive, not because it was efficient, but because they chose to. And when we finally arrived, they didn't simply vanish. They became part of us. The story of Neanderthals is not a story of extinction. It is a story of survival, quietly written into the biology of every person who carries their DNA, which is most of the people alive on Earth today.